Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 819, Garry and Richard are here. We've got lots to talk about, lots of Windows 11 news from the Apple event, even talking about Zune, EV news, and lots more. So let's get straight to Garry and Richard. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
Okay, very good. A week off this week, and I felt a bit disconnected. And then I saw we were talking offline about Windows and ARM, and I saw a lot of stories blow up about Windows and ARM, and two and two together. Richard, I think you're responsible for this.
Yeah, I may have done a thing last week. As you know, I've been running Windows and ARM, Windows 11, I should say, on ARM, on Parallel 17, and I think it was last week, the week before, it just stopped working. I began getting the update error that I think lots of people have been getting with Windows and ARM.
And
what's that, Garry?
Interesting time. Gary's joining as well.
So I've been getting the unsupported hardware error because obviously Microsoft, as you said last week, they've moved the dev channel to the point where the dev channel is now running on pre-release versions that are after GA, and so therefore the chips aren't supported anymore. And I was railing about that last week, and so it was a real shame because Windows 11 on ARM running on Parallels on the M1 Mac, it's really fast, really impressively fast. And so I fired off a question to Microsoft about it, and they thought about it for a very long time. I mean, I'm just trying to work out how many days they sat on it for. It was quite a long time, and then eventually they came back to me and they said that the Apple Windows 11 on ARM on the Apple M1 was not a supported scenario. Here's our hardware list. And very clearly in the hardware list it said, here are the ARM chips, a bunch of Qualcomm chips, and obviously the SQ1, SQ2 chips. So fine, okay, I wrote that up, said there we go, that's the answer, and that. And this week that appears to have blown up a little bit because it appears to cause some people some angst. And I think certain people were expecting a different answer from Microsoft on this, and unfortunately, it looks like as of today, Microsoft's take is the Apple M1 chip is not going to be supported. Obviously, we knew Boot Camp wasn't going to be a functioning thing for Windows and ARM. But it transpires that neither is it running through Parallels. I should point out that Parallels very quickly patched their system, and Parallels is a virtual machines platform, and version 17.01, which is available now, fixes the issue. Whatever it does, it fixes the issue. The Windows Insider, the Windows Dev Channel Insider works fine.
Yeah, so as far as Parallels makes the media think that it's a supported system. That's
right. Yeah. So the error goes away and things now work. I mean, obviously, as you know, Ian, there's ways of hacking around it if you really want to. You can make all kinds of things work, be they Raspberry Pis, or I think you got a particular a thing for your Lumia phone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which I think are quite fun hobbyist things to try and make work. But I think losing the Windows on ARM on Apple M1 was quite a big thing to not work, even though I can imagine in Microsoft's world it's still quite a niche thing because obviously Intel and the Intel ecosystem and compatibles is the vast accounts for the vast amount of Windows PCs that run out there. But yes, I just it did appear to blow up a bit this week that yes they have come out and said it's not going to be a supported scenario. And I want to emphasize this. At the moment, I mean, I do wonder if there's going to be a rethinking, or if maybe the left arm's not talking to the right arm, because it just seems an odd thing to do, particularly when it performs incredibly well. I mean, it really is good. It runs extremely well, and that's obviously the M1 chip is a fast chip anyway. Parallels have done a great job, so it does run incredibly fast. So we'll see what happens. But it's been an interesting few days for me.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's because the chip, the emulation layer, all that is, and the BIOS and everything else is outside of Microsoft's control. There's no contracts in place. There's nothing.
I mean, I've no idea. I mean, the thing is, it runs as a virtual machine, so all kinds of things should not aren't checked. There's all kinds of hardware checks that don't happen if you're running it as a VM. You can run much older Intel chips as a VM. And we run Windows 11 in a VM, much older Intel chips, and that's fine. And that's how you can get around a lot of the newer compatibility issues. So I mean, My instinct is that the Microsoft Windows team is simply too busy to deal with this this issue. They have a straightforward compatibility checker. It looked to see what chip was running, and it couldn't find one of the ones it was looking for, and that was it. Up came the error. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think it's Microsoft deliberately blocking it. I think it's not high on the list of priorities.
Yeah,
very charitably.
Yeah, it's a small market, I guess, but it makes a good story, and yeah. And
it made from it. I mean, for me, it was just an aside on a story about the latest Insider build. So I was quite surprised to see people take it and run with it, because to me, it does seem like quite a niche thing to actually do. It was annoying me more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was upset my Raspberry Pi wasn't supported, but to be fair, I don't think that that was ever a supported scenario. And pleased to say, I've got all the latest builds running on it without too much effort. In fact, it's pretty minimal amount of effort, and it doesn't take much Googling around or going through Bing to find the solutions. But it works. But yeah, of course, it's not supported, and I wouldn't expect that. But a little bit more tricky on the Lumia. The issue with the Lumia is the partition sizes aren't quite big enough for all the things that you need. So you've got to do a little bit of rejigging on that. But Raspberry Pi, no problem, works fine. Makes a nice little media player, Raspberry Pi running Windows 11. Actually, I'm surprised VLC works on there. Great, because there's an ARM version of VLC.
It does work well, actually. Yeah, after our discussion last week, I did get it working with a bit of hacking around, because I wanted to try and make it work without too much hackery. But in the end, I had to do a little bit more hacking. I made it work. It's great. I think I've taken this as a hint to say that I should perhaps concentrate more on my emulation and development and Ubuntu and things on the Pi, as opposed to trying to make Windows work just because I can. But it does run surprisingly well. So it's disappointing that it's come October the 5th, it's going to be properly blocked, and the dev channel will be blocked. But again, there'll always be ways to hack around it. Yeah, I mean, that said, though, with the Raspberry Pi, obviously we did have some news this week as well about new Raspberry Pis going to the space station, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, go on, tell us about that.
Yeah, well, this is the AstroPi project, which I don't know if you remember when the UK astronaut Tim Peake went up to the space station. I think it was 2015, 2016. He was up there, I think. I'm sure. Google can tell us that's for sure. But he went up on the Principia mission, and one of the things on that was they also took a pair of Raspberry Pi computers, which students on the ground could then use to upload code and run it in space. And the machines had things like sensors and had an LCD screen, and I think one of them was bolted to a window, so it had a camera as well. And so students could set up code, and I think it's got to the point where they can control them from the ground pretty much now. So there's not so much interaction needed by the astronauts at the space station, which is handy. But of course, they're starting to wear down because they've been up there for a very long time. There's two problems. The first is that, as you know, Raspberry Pi hardware has moved on dramatically in the last 6 years. So they were facing the issue where you had students on the ground using the Raspberry Pi kit that was way superior to what was in space. And that meant you had to think your programs were not going to run that fast. You had less capacity, less storage. The other problem was I think there's some battery back stuff on the Raspberry Pis on the space station, and they're due to expire, I think, next year. So they really had to get those systems changed out. So they're sending up a pair of new Raspberry Pi units. It's going to be Pi 4 with 8 gigs of RAM. So quite a big jump. I mean, I think performance-wise, it's somewhere 40 times the performance of what's there now. So that'd be good. And they've also put up the high-quality Pi camera, which I think is a 12 megapixel unit, I think. So again, that's an order of magnitude better, and that can be used to take images of the Earth. Also, I think there's going to be infrared sensors. There's the usual set of sort of pressure, humidity, temperature sensors as well. And I think most importantly, or most excitingly, is they're also including the Google Coral machine learning unit as well. So kind of like a co-processor thing to help with machine learning and AI type things on the Raspberry Pi. So again, if you're a researcher it's quite exciting. It's quite exciting stuff, and I think they're going to go up on the December mission, the SpaceX CRS-24. So they'll be, I think, assembled by Mattis Mara, who's up there now, the ESA astronaut, and I think ESA astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti, she I think goes up next year, and she's due to be the commander. It's all from memory, so please excuse me if I get this wrong. She's due to be the commander of the space station. And she's also going to be running some student stuff as well, using these new Pi units. What's cool about them is there's two types of mission, and the mission 0 is particularly exciting because for that it's open to, I think, ages 7 to 19, and you've just got to be able to do a bit of Python code, and you can submit it. It gets uploaded to the space station. It's run on the Pis, and then you get a certificate back to say your code was run, at this location, when the space station was at this location at this time. Which I think is really quite cool and a good way of getting kids to sort of, learn a bit of Python as well. So yeah, that's the Raspberry Pi news. Sadly, not running Windows 11 OE, I'm afraid. It's going to be, I think it's a version of Raspberry OS, but a very much a lockdown, hardened version of it, which I think they can remote into from the ground to run this stuff. So yeah, but exciting stuff, and I would suggest going to the AstroPi site and signing up if you fancy running some code in the space station. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's brilliant that. Yeah, and it gets kids enthusiastic about coding and stuff like that. It does its job. So so good evening, Gary, as well. We didn't get a chance to say good evening before. Oh, you're on mute. Yes.
I'm on double mute. I wasn't Skype
double mute. There you go.
My microphone was muted. It's better than triple mute, but it's
yeah.
No, I didn't want to interrupt Richard's flow. He was going well.
Always interrupt, Gary. It's always interrupt.
So as well as that news as well, Gary has got some EV news for us tonight. We've got some Apple news as well.
Yeah.
Windows 11 news as well. Perhaps we should change the order that we normally do. Maybe we go to Gary first for his EV news rather than leaving it to later in the show. We had a good interview that you had last week on the show.
With the Instavolt, and I'd like to point out that those Instavolts will not be turned off for 8 hours a day. And as some newspapers have been saying this week, so this is the news that two things which we announced this week: that all new build houses will have EV chargers, which I think is great. That's really good news. But there was also a thing about new smart chargers having to turn off during peak hours. And this got spun by some papers who may have a thing against EVs into that all public chargers would be turned off for 8 hours a day during peak hours, and you wouldn't be able to charge during peak hours, which is a load of rubbish. Basically, all it's saying is that the default setting on any new charger will be that it'll only charge during off-peak hours, which is exactly what you want as an EV driver, because you don't want to be charged for pay for peak rate electricity. You want to so most EV drivers I know have always wanted their chargers to work only during off-peak hours, so they can get the best rates of charging. So that's the default setting. The rules and regulations actually say when these new chargers turn on for the first time, you must be prompted to see if you want to keep those default settings, so you can change them to whatever you want, so you're not forced to turn your car off for 8 hours. Because I've seen so many people say this week, well, I say I'm not buying an EV because I won't be able to charge it when I need to travel. That's rubbish. You will be able to charge it in travel. So it has definitely been spun by some people in the press. I don't think the press don't do anything like that. Richard, do they spin things? But yeah, that's. No,
I certainly don't. In fact, what I do is I tend to fact check and ask people.
Yes, you do. Actually, you're really good.
It's not hard to do actually to fact check and ask people if you go. Listen, I don't understand why some of them simply to be unable to pick up the phone or email to say, hey, I just want to check this thing before I write it. It saves a lot of pain in the long term.
Well, you do wonder sometimes with this stuff nowadays, obviously with clicks being so important to some publishers, that actually having a controversial headline drives clicks and drives engagement.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think that's partly what it's been. But because it has got into the public view and a lot of this, and I've heard it from a lot of people I speak to on a daily basis saying that, well, I'm not buying an EV because I'm not going to be able to charge during the day, which is really unfortunate that it's got that message has got across like that. And the government probably should have done something better to spin it a bit better, perhaps, but they didn't want to, obviously. But no, but it's actually good news. I think it's a really good thing that one, that they're putting chargers on everywhere, and two, that all these new smart chargers will actually do what most people want and only charge when it's cheap rate electricity. And this is only talking about chargers you have at home. So if you've got a driveway and you can install a charger, this is basically for you going forward, and extending the subsidisation for that as well, which is really good. So so that's good news.
So you could override that. So if you come home at 10 o'clock in the morning, you need to charge up, you will be able to charge up.
You'll be able to you'll always be able to override it, and you'll also be able to override the default settings when you first set it up. So it's definitely it's a good thing. It's forcing manufacturers to actually make smart chargers, which a lot of them haven't done up to now, or have charged you for the ability to have a smart charger over and above the rate they get subsidised to install these chargers at. So it's all round, it's a good thing. It just has been spun badly. Now the other bit of news, which is not actually going to be announced until Friday, but we will have an interview with these people. Ngenie charging, as was or now Osprey charging, we've had them on the show before. They are announcing a very big expansion on Friday, which we will have news of next week. So I'll give you a bit more information on that, but it's really exciting stuff. So that's good. And they are, we said last week that unsupported are probably the most popular charging network with our listeners and readers. From what I've heard, the Osprey network's pretty high up there with them as well. They're pretty close. And Ian from Osprey and the guys from Instavolt get on quite well as well anyway, so there's a lot of mutual admiration there. But hopefully Ian will be actually coming on the show in a few weeks' time as well to talk about this massive expansion, which is it's really big news. It's definitely, there's a lot of things happening in the EV world at the moment in terms of new chargers coming up. I stopped off when I was up to see you at the weekend, and there's actually a charging hub near you nowadays, which is just basically it's like a garage forecourt, as a sort of like typical Shell BP type garage. Well, it's an MFG one. It's just it hasn't got any petrol pumps. It's still got the shop. It's still got the car washing. It's got everything you'd normally expect to see on the forecourt, but it's just chargers. And that's one of the first ones of those in the country. I know the GridServe electric forecourt sort of thing they've got is more like a motorway services. This is more like a standard petrol pump. And MFG are going to start producing a lot of those around the country. And it's really well laid out. It worked well, plugged in straight away. And the great thing, of course, about those is they're attended. So if these things go wrong, the people on the forecourt will actually report the fact they've got a broken charger and get it fixed fairly quickly. Unlike some of these ones out in remote spaces, it's well lit, it was covered, it had all the things going for it that I would put in my charging manifesto, that you don't get wet to get in charge. In the rain, and being in Manchester, that's quite important.
It never rains in Manchester.
actually, it has never rained in Manchester when I've been there, which is a very good point. But so people tell me it does. But yeah, so it's covered and it's really good and wasn't actually that expensive, and it just worked. Cables were a little bit short. That's one of my bugbears at the moment. I think that certain charger manufacturers are pushing the boundaries on what they can get away with the standards on the cables. The problem is the cables are expensive, and the longer they are, the heavier they are as well, which makes them more difficult for people to manoeuvre. But the problem they're just so short you actually almost have to hold them into the socket to get the car to connect, which is not what you want to do. You don't want pressure on that cable, that socket. But no, really good to see that happening. And just a lot of stuff happening over the next 6 months, and certainly by the end of next year, I don't think anybody's going to have, because I don't think anybody has range anxiety anymore, especially when the newer cars come out, the 300-mile range ones. What they do tend to have is charger anxiety, is getting to the charger and actually finding whether it's working or not. I was actually able to do the whole trip to Manchester and back on one charge, and that charge I was able to do at our motorway services, because they suddenly now with GridServe doing what they've told us they were going to do, and it has happened. All the chargers on my route were actually upgraded and I was able to use them. If I could have used any of them, and I just happened to use one of them, and that was a stop which wasn't actually meant for charging, it was for some other things, so it just topped up with that charge. But I really didn't need to charge because I was able to destination charge in Manchester. Very good network in the BEV network in Manchester. So when we met you at the Trafford Centre, I was able to plug in and get virtually the whole journey back worth of charge in the time we were actually there. So it's very effective, that way of working. So that journey was very cheap, under Peterborough to Manchester and back, in probably what would cost to buy one litre of fuel these days.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, just having the reliability that you get there and the charger works. That is.
Yeah, and that was actually a noticeable huge improvement in Manchester, because the last few times I've been there, and I know they've changed the network and this BEV network's come on, the reliability of all this, the destination chargers, the low speed chargers, was brilliant, and a lot easier to start running as well. It actually had an app which worked. I've never known a charging app actually works. So yeah, no, it was good. It was good to see that working so well. And obviously we've got a load more interviews coming up when I can get around to editing them all. We've got so much content from Fully Charged outside, which I know was really good content there as well. Some really interesting interviews with people in the industry and some of the other things which are going on. Particularly interested in the co-charger interview, which is coming up fairly shortly. That's a company which is allowing you to share your charger with your friends. So it's not like somebody's share your charger with anybody and everybody. The idea is you would share your charger with people you know. So if you worked a night shift, for example, you could share your charger with someone working a day shift, and you can make some money from that and share the cost of having that electricity, which struck me as a very good idea, and they seem to have done it very well. So that's coming up. We've got loads of other interviews as well. It was a great few days. Good to see all the new cars coming out. Very, very impressed with some of them.
Although on Twitter, I'm pretty sure I saw an electric Jaguar stranded across the.
Oh yeah, well yes, I did. But that actually was nothing to do with the fact it was an electric car. So this was actually on the day I was supposed to go to Manchester, and my car just stopped dead. And what it was, and this is actually something I find amazing, that we are still using CAN bus in our cars, which is based on a technology from the early 1980s. I mean, we've got rid of this networking system everywhere else because it just didn't work. Because if you start getting components not working properly, one single component can throw out the whole car. And basically what had happened was the CAN bus had signalled the fact that I wanted to go in reverse and forward gear at the same time, which obviously can't really happen. And the car tried its very best to do that, but even electric cars struggle at going backwards and forwards at the same time. So it just seized up. But I have to say, I was really impressed with the assistance I got. The Jaguar assistance guys came out within 40 minutes, and the car was fixed, and we were able to make the journey and do what we needed to do. But yeah, I mean, I find it amazing, and the reason apparently is because I was talking to the engineer about this stuff is actually still mandated. All the regulations that the cars have to go through for type assistance, everything has to have an ODB port, everything has to be on CAN bus. You've got all these things are still mandatory. Only certain companies, beginning with T, ignore the regulations and just pursue selling cars and get around it. But which actually should make them more reliable. It's like 12-volt batteries. All these cars still have 12-volt batteries. Why? There's no real need. I mean, you have to run your accessories off 12 volts, but you could have a step-down adapter, and then you would have a big, massive battery, and you would never run out. And some of the electric car problems I've seen have actually been caused by 12-volt problems. So, I mean, generally EVs are way more reliable than petrol cars. Actually, they also run out of fuel a lot less than petrol cars do, as the AA pointed out a couple of weeks back. They go to far less calls for electric vehicles being stranded than they do petrol cars.
Right. I think I'd have to put some context around it and say, is that per 1,000 cars, per 1,000, or is that a simple quantity? Because it's very important.
It was actually based. They did say based on the total number of calls per. So based on the proportionally based on the type of vehicle. So yeah, there was a higher proportion of petrol cars going than electric cars. So being stranded. And also they actually had a lot less faults for electric cars than they do with petrol cars generally, again per 1,000. So yeah, it was interesting that whole thing. It's fact checking. But it was definitely, I mean,
faults wise, I'd have to look at the age of the car as well. I mean, you'd expect electric cars to be more recent.
Yeah, there is that as well.
Quite old and crumbly, aren't they? Really.
Yeah.
So
they're going to be
tricky about those things.
but there is still getting to be quite a few older electric cars around now. Some Nissan Leafs have been around almost 10 years now, so some of those are still going, even though they had tiny batteries to start with.
I was going to say, I mean, that's actually quite exciting for battery capacity, because we'd always expected the batteries to become less good as time's gone by, and yet the Leafs of the Priuses have shown that no, they're fine.
Yeah, I mean, some of the early Leafs did have battery management problems, and if you were rapid charging them regularly and getting them hot, then the batteries may have declined. But if you're charging them home on slow charges, which a lot of people did, they just last forever.
It's amazing, really. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but I know someone out in the States who's run now on his. I think he's actually now turned over 700,000 miles on his Tesla. He wasn't last time, so he does a lot of mileage because he's a taxi, or an airport taxi in California running it. But yeah, and he says he's got very minimal battery degradation over that time. I mean, some people do have problems with batteries, and it's like all car components, some things can fail. And obviously that's a big cost if it does, but most of the manufacturers give you very generous battery warranties because they know people are worried about it.
Yeah, and again, I just reiterate. I think one of the key things was people were very concerned about the longevity of the batteries. Yeah, and it looks like it's not a problem.
It's definitely not a problem. I mean, it would have been a problem if we'd all gone for very rapid charging, which was actually talked about at one stage. There was talk about putting rapid chargers in at homes. That would have been a problem for battery life, because the main issue with batteries is when you get them hot and then cool them down and get them hot again, which you tend to do when you do lots of rapid charging. But most people don't do a lot of rapid charging. It's a very rare occasion. You mostly charge overnight at home, and I think that's a real tricky thing for people to get their heads around if you come from a petrol car. The idea of actually you don't go out to charge your car most of the time. It's like you have to think of it far more like a phone than a car. It's the same mentality. You have a phone, you plug it in overnight, it's ready the next morning, and you don't have to make special trips out to put fuel in it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I always charge my phone at night, and it's ready for the next day. So,
well, that was one of the great genius things of Steve Jobs and the iPhone, wasn't it? Convincing us that we didn't need phones that lasted a week. Just a day was enough.
Yeah, Mel Nokias used to last forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and talking of iPhones, there's an Apple event today, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, lucky 13. It's the iPhone 13, as expected, appeared today, and I mean, I think it's been like this for a few years now. I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. I don't know how you two felt about it. I mean, it's another spec bump. The camera's better. The screens of the iPhone Pro 13 has got a higher refresh rate right now, so it's almost like Apple are playing catch up in many ways. The storage is up to 1 terabyte now on the higher end phones. Faster chip, but it kind of did. I didn't see anything particularly innovative there. It seemed to be really a spec bump, really, to me, and that's a miss on the whole iPhone thing.
No, I think it is.
The notch is smaller. The notch is smaller. We're interested to know from Garry what impact that's going to have on developers who obviously had to consider the notch in their applications.
Yeah, indeed, and you're not going to be able to. Well, you are being able to detect if you're on a reduced notch size. I mean, there was actually a lot of talk about it going notchless, but obviously that's not happened. Which actually would have been easier, because a lot of phones used to be notchless and the code was already written for them. But now you're going to have to look at your UX and work out how you adjust it. And yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah.
Form factor changes are always a pain, and that's why one of the reasons why iPhone does well with developers often is because they don't have to think about that very often.
Well, they do now.
Yeah, they do now.
I've no notch on this one. This is the Note 20, and there's no notch. There's a little tiny hole. Yeah. And that's it. I don't really see why it needs a giant notch, or even a reduced notch.
What I found odd as well is it's still Face ID, isn't it? That they've still not done a thumb unlocking on the iPhone, which I was surprised about, unless I missed that.
No, as far as I'm knowing. I mean, and Apple don't change their spots very often, do they?
Yeah, I know, but they have had now. This is a second generation to go through when we're all wearing masks, and their current fix, which is if you're wearing an Apple Watch, then sometimes it might unlock if you're wearing a mask. But you would kind of hope for a better solution than that. A return of the thumbprint somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe it just takes too long just to go through the whole turnaround of putting it on, and for then, maybe they think
it's on the iPad, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't understand what the issue is, unless it's something to do with pride or something, because they did make such a thing hoo-ha about the Face ID. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I do still wear a mask when I'm in enclosed spaces, and it is a pain, and it doesn't always work. And of course, it needs an Apple Watch to work anyway, which is a pain. So I don't understand why they've chosen not to go down that route again, which is a shame, I think. Although I did note that they had bumped up the base storage. It's now 128 gigabytes now instead of 664 on the 13, which is, I think, good as a base storage. And I think the basic price is that around $1,000.
Yeah, I'm just looking at for the Pro one, the iPhone 13 Pro on the Apple's UK site. It's 949 for the 128 gig version.
Yeah, so almost one.
We almost a few years ago got to the point where the smartphones are really affordable. And between Apple and Samsung, I think they've managed to get the margins back up again on phones, haven't they? They really have made, by making them a glossy, shiny consumer brands, a desirable fashion item. They really have managed to get these prices back up, because I think we've talked on the show maybe maybe even more longer about how the prices were going down all the time, and but they really have managed to push these prices up.
Yeah, although you are getting an awful lot of bang for your buck with it. There's no getting away about how powerful these devices are, and I include the Samsung high-end devices too. And there are cheaper options. I mean, you can get the older iPhones, which I think is the iPhone 12 still available. I think so. The older iPhones are still going to be around, and the iPhone SE I think will still be around as well, and they're a good deal cheaper. I mean, to be frank, the iPhone SE, which I think you can get for I think it's about £389, isn't it, for the base version?
Yeah,
that's more than enough for most people, and it's got a thumbprint sensor. So I don't know. Perhaps I'm being a bit mean there, but certainly, I mean, my wife has an iPhone SE, a new one, and she's very happy with it. And I've got my big chunky iPhone XS, and I think, yeah, actually, the SE, that might have been a better bet on reflection. Camera's not as good.
Yeah, just they're expensive, aren't they? But yeah, like I mean, you've got like 20 million lenses on the back of it with.
Yeah. I mean, it's what, three times optical zoom now. So I think it's got I think it goes up to 6 times potentially. So it's on the Pro. So, and it's it doesn't look as though they really have focused on the camera this time around as well. So the camera, I think, is better for low light. Is there a portrait video you can do as well now? So good for the old TikTok generation. But I don't know. I mean, it just feels like a spec bump. The price is around the same. It's all a bit. I mean, they've done a similar bump, I think, for the iPad Mini, the iPad, and there's new Apple Watches too with slightly bigger screens. But all told, I must admit, it did leave me a bit cold.
Yeah, you kind of, especially the single screen format. There's not a lot of innovation in that. Samsung are the same. The S21 or whatever. It's not huge leaps and bounds with them. Whereas where we're seeing sort of differences is with the folds and the flips and the duos and that kind of thing. But again, I think what happens is we get this period of innovation with different form factors, and then this kind of perhaps settle down to the optimum form factor until the next thing comes along.
Yeah, so I think, as Garry speculated in the past, the next thing could be the phone disappearing completely into a different device.
Yep. I mean, the eye projection stuff is still out there, and it's getting smaller. So I can actually see it being in your glasses. So
I'm not wearing a pair of Facebook Ray-Bans, just
They're small enough you wouldn't have this sort of big bulky thing on the outside. So
yeah. I thought you'd be one of those getting that, Richard. Those Facebook glasses. I thought that would be just right up your street.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I want Facebook cameras watching everything I do.
That's true.
What
could possibly go wrong?
Oh, nothing at all. Nothing can go wrong. It'd be absolutely fine. It's all for your own good to make sure that what gets sold to you is what you've looked at. So
the other thing Apple I saw, I don't know how closely either of you followed this. There's a ongoing case between Epic and Apple around the in-app purchases and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And haven't Apple lost a significant part of that case, where it potentially means that in-app purchases in other payment platforms or systems will have to be allowed within the Apple Store? So you at the moment you can't sort of buy something as an in-app purchase unless it's through Apple's system. You can't go to the vendor's site or whatever. I think it's something it's like that, isn't it? It's locked down. Whereas I think does this really mean that we're going to see some changes?
Well, possibly, but it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for Epic, I think, because I think they only won one of the 10 counts in the lawsuit, and the problem is while I think they won the thing about the in-app purchasing system where they obviously wanted to use their own to stop having to give Apple the percentage. I think Apple isn't required to reinstate their developer account or put its apps back in the store. So
right.
I'm not entirely sure how much of a win it really is for Epic. It's a tricky one. I mean, I'm not that familiar with the result, apart from the fact it didn't seem to be that great for Epic, although it was obviously a bit of a kick for Apple. Maybe they'll rethink their, quite frankly, awful. It's a terrible commissions they charge developers. But Gary, I mean, I guess you are a developer who's probably directly impacted by this.
Yeah, I was hoping a bit more. They would come down a bit harder on their evaluation of product as well. In that they can basically ban anything they like. But basically, if you look at American shopping laws, that's actually they were never going to win that one, because basically it's a shop front end. American law says you can sell what you control what you sell. If you don't want to sell something, you don't have to sell it. The only way that would, I think, get out of the way if the competition stuff came in, which I think actually is going to happen in Europe. I think that they are going to this, because there's a whole big investigation going in the EU at the moment about not just Apple's store, but all these stores. And at last, someone is saying that you can't avoid a monopoly by having multiple platforms. If you are stopping an end customer buying something because you're controlling the platform they have to stop them buying another product, that may be seen as a monopoly position, rather as whereas before it's always been sort of Apple don't have a monopoly because there's loads of Google phones out there, which is something that I think a lot of developers sort of argue against at times. I mean, the problem at the moment is if you write an application and Apple don't like it, it's not going on their store, so you can't guarantee you've actually got a market when you write something. And some of their decisions can be very strange, to say the least. And probably by saying that, I'll never be allowed another app in the App Store.
Yeah,
because that does seem to happen as well. But yeah, so I think it's an interesting one. I think I mean, and to be honest, Google Play is going that way as well. The Play Store is starting to get more clamped down on. It used to be you get virtually anything into it, and now they're starting to not. I mean, I can see to some extent you need some quality control. You need to avoid some of these apps which are stealing passwords and stealing credit cards and stuff like that. That's understandable. But some of the reasoning behind some of the apps being rejected is strange, to say the least. And it's always a challenge, and it's very difficult when you're a sort of third-party developer or you're developing for another company to be able to turn around that company and say, well, Apple just rejected your app for no real reason, and we can't do anything about it. Which is very, and you tend not to get paid then, which is very difficult.
And of course, Microsoft are going completely the other way, aren't they now? Yeah, where you can have any system in there, any store system, where you go.
Yeah.
And even payment platforms and CDNs and everything, which perhaps shows you that where the state of the market with with the Microsoft Store how it's been in the last few years, where really where developers just have no interest in it. Perhaps now we might see a bit more interest in it because of the flexibility that's there. That it's not, because you can put exes and other stuff. So maybe we'll see some more interest in that. Yeah. In fact, I think some people have seen the Android store show up a couple of times, haven't they? But then it's not actually active at the moment. So I've seen a couple of screenshots. I think it's the Windows subsystem for Android has shown up in the Microsoft Store. So hopefully that should be coming soon. Maybe in the next few weeks, insiders will get to test that.
One hopes so.
Not sure how much. As good as it'll be, it might be handy, but I'm not sure how much use we'll get for it. But it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I can't think of the top of my head of anything that I'm really desperate for. An Android app that I'm desperate for to run on my PC, but we'll see.
Yeah, most of my things can be done via web pages. I mean, we could I don't know, Office apps perhaps.
Yeah, possibly. Did you see that? I think was it Huawei or Xiaomi? I can't remember which one of the two. Huawei, I think, have got their own version of this, so that you can actually run apps, Android apps, on their platform.
No, tell me more.
So I'm going to have to dig this out, because I saw it briefly when I was fleeting through something else, and I didn't actually follow it up. But I'll do some research while we're talking. But it basically looked very good implementation. It looked like it was a very native way of installing Android apps, as though they just appeared like any other app on the.
Well, they kind of are Android, those devices as well, aren't they?
Well, no, this was actually on Windows.
Oh, Windows, right? I was thinking their phone, yeah.
So,
well, while you look on that, I'll show you. Just look at that start bar there. Anything wrong with that picture? It's off-centered.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this week's bug of the week is the off-centered toolbar taskbar in Windows 11. But we did get some new builds last week. We got a new build for the October 5th launch, 22000.184, and we also got a dev channel build 22454. I don't know which of these you've tested yet, Richard, but there was only one difference in 22454, which the recycle pin has got a new menu.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, I obviously played with both. Yes, it's got a new menu. I mean, there's quite a lot of fixes and things in 22454, yeah. So it's to be fair. Whereas, as I would expect in the October 5th GA build, which is trying to remember is that 184 220000184.
Yeah.
There's not a lot more in that one. What is slightly worrying is the known issues list, because we are now, we're 3 weeks out from the GA, and people are still having problems, which is a concern.
Yeah.
But particularly in terms of the new taskbar and start menu not working properly, and a bug check happening for some service prerequisites. I think they're a little bit close to GA now to still be having these known issues. So I'd like to see them disappear the next build, and there'd be nothing. It will be clean and lovely.
Yeah, and I think they will be able to. Obviously, they'll be able to patch these, these builds because they're doing it through minor releases. So they're not going to have to push full builds out, but.
They will be, but wouldn't you like a software company one day to release software that works first time without requiring a patch the next day? I mean, wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice, but it's not the way the world works anymore.
Oh, I'm getting old. I'm getting old. I've been doing some work with some retro machines, sort of 40, 50 years old recently, and it's amazing the fact that the software on those things just all worked first time and was all written.
Yeah, but then again, the development environments for those used to work first time as well, and they wouldn't fill the bugs.
Oh, you mean basically the text editors?
Yeah. So talk about software which is going to work first time. This thing is the Huawei mobile app engine, which is basically allows you to run apps, Android apps directly on the computer. It doesn't say what these apps are. They say they come from the Huawei app gallery, so obviously that's a restricted list. You can operate them with keyboard and mouse as well, and they expand to the larger display. Interesting thing is you can just run the APK directly from the desktop.
Are there any issues around Google Play stuff? If you
that won't work.
Depend on any Google services.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it doesn't. There's very little. There's not much more detail about it. It's in beta at the moment. Yeah. It does support multi-window mode, which actually would be better than the Windows version at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it seems to be quite interesting. They're going to launch on. In fact, they had the launch yesterday. So Tuesday.
Yeah. There'll be no access to the Play Store because that's where they're banned, aren't they, from that? Yeah. But then there isn't any access for the Play Store for the Windows, for the Microsoft version, because that uses the Amazon Store.
So is this a little bit like the canonical Ambox stuff where you can run Android images in the cloud or on bare metal?
Yeah, I guess so. But this is the interesting thing about this is you can literally just double click on an APK file and it will launch.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, it does. That's very interesting. So, yeah, and that's going to be available on their MateBook series.
It's an interesting concept. I mean, if you've got a Samsung phone and your phone, you can run Android apps on your PC. You know, they run via your phone, but they do run in a window. And I've used it, and yeah, it's been good. There's some things like my temperature sensor in the greenhouse that is only an Android app, so. I can fire up from my PC, but the number of times I want to check that and just pick up the phone is pretty remote, pretty low. So I'll be interested to see how beneficial it is. But with all these things, if there's the one time when you need that app and it's there in the store, then it's useful for you. So I suppose it's better than.
I mean, I can definitely see it as being very useful from a developer point of view because it gets around the need for running emulators, which is pain. To say the least. So yeah, I could certainly see that being very powerful from a development point of view.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get to see that soon. I've got a feeling it's not so far off. With the more leaked screenshots we see, the more the chances are that it's on its way. But we'll see. Hopefully, Insider Builds, the dev channel, will get that soon. I just thought that taskbar bug is a real strange one, isn't it? Because it's so visible, and I'm surprised that one got through. It's mentioned in the release notes about the taskbar bug, but I saw it in the notes and didn't pay too much attention, and then I suddenly started using it. And think, what's going on with this? It just looks weird. My brain doesn't like it, the off-centered stuff. It's very strange, but it doesn't cause any issues apart from sometimes you can't see the full list of apps. So if you've got a lot of the things open, they're off the side of the screen, so you can't do them without using the task switches. You can't just click them from the taskbar. But it's a very weird bug that, and it does look a very strange little bug when you see it like that. But hopefully we'll get that fixed next week. But I did see a number of people really moaning and complaining about it on Reddit and on Twitter, but this is what you expect. You're in the dev channel. They did warn that there would be bugs, and I'm not sure they threw this in to say, "See, we told you there would be." But yeah, they did send enough emails out to insiders on the dev channel, because I got about 20 of those emails warning me that I had a device on the dev channel. But anyway, I can live with it. The actual performance and everything else is good. So. Yeah, I noticed the taskbar's got a bit of hate this week from a few places. So, well, I don't think 3 weeks before the release date anything's going to change on that. So it's a bit late. It's a bit late for that.
I mean, to be frank, did you kind of feel like it's deja vu all over again? Because I can remember when Windows 95 came out, people said, "Oh, it's on the program manager, it's awful," and then Windows 10 came out, so, "Oh, where's my Windows 7 start menu gone? It's awful." And now it's Windows 11. "Oh, my Windows 10 start menu's gone. It's awful." It just feels like
human nature, isn't it?
And to be honest, yeah. I mean, I'm no, as you know, not the biggest fan of these systems, and I think the Windows 11 start menu's fine. Doesn't change my way of working. I still press Windows R to do stuff, and it all works as it did before. So I never really used the start menu that much anyway. So I don't know why it's coming for quite so much flack. I think it's just people being afraid of change, maybe, or was that too simplistic?
No, I think the one thing I've heard mentioned is the drag and drop to the taskbar is that people used a lot. So I think if you had a file on your desktop, you could drag it over an icon, it would launch, or you could drag things.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do dislike the fact that right-click on the taskbar doesn't bring up Task Manager anymore. That annoys the heck.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that one. So, but I've got it pinned now. So
exactly.
You can right-click on the
same thing.
Yeah, the Task Managers, if you right-click on the Start button now. But yeah, I did used to do that all the time, and it has taken me a little bit to get used to that. But it's one of those. It's changes. Sometimes things are changed for change's sake. That's why cars don't look like the BMW 3 Series doesn't look like a 1983 series, because things change. Some for practical reasons, from aesthetic, and some for change's sake. It's just the way we are as humans. The way we're rounded corners, then we had square corners. We're back with rounding corners. We'll have square corners in Windows 13. Things go around in circles.
Yeah, that reminds me. Someone I was talking to yesterday was moaning about the width of modern cars. That they've all got so wide. And yet, and there is a reason for that. I mean, it's because we've put safety curtains in the sides. All cars now got side airbags. They take up a good 3 inches of space in the side of each car, which means all our regulations for parking spaces are now out of date.
Yep. And seat width and everything. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
Not in my old Golf, though. That's fine.
No, you can park anywhere.
What I find hilarious is I've got an old Golf, a Golf Mark 1, which was the saloon car, or kind of the hatchback car of the 70s and 80s, and I guess you'd think the equivalent would be the Escort or the Focus, or maybe other cars, and you put it again up against Volkswagen's smallest car, the Up, and it looks tiny.
Yeah, and most of that is down to adding all these safety features in.
The doors are about the are like tinfoil, so that's probably I wouldn't want to be in an accident, that's for sure.
Yeah. So and that's just things change, and we just have to get used to those changes. Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing for Windows users. I mean, Microsoft aren't just going to say, yeah, you know what, you're probably right. We prefer the Windows 10 one as well. Here you go. This is it.
Isn't that kind of what they did with Windows 8 and 8.1 though?
I suppose it kind of is. Yeah, you're probably right.
And they spent the whole time from Windows 8 to Windows 10 backtracking to try and get back to Windows 7 without saying, you know what, we may have made a mistake, but this menu seems perhaps not quite the thing we should have done. So
yeah, I think that's still the missing Windows button on server. Which one was it? Server 2012 or one of those at that time when Windows 8 came out, where they decided not to put the start button in Windows Server. That was the biggest. That to me was the killer. That still irritates me when I have to go onto an old system and I see that. Where's the start button? One other thing I would briefly mention, I mentioned last week about Zoompedia, a retrospective of Zoom, and Peter Bull has published his Zoompedia. It's a coffee table book, he describes it as, a digital coffee table book, looking at the history of the Zoom and the community. It's a free download. I think you can tip him a coffee or whatever on his site, but hopefully Peter's going to come on the show at some point in the future to talk about why he's taken this trip back down memory lane to what was a fantastic device but wasn't exactly a success for Microsoft. So it's a great thing to have a look at. So it's Zoompedia, so ZUNEPEDIA.com. I'll include a link in the show notes, and you can have a look at that, and hopefully Pete will come on that. I've still got my Zooms over on the shelf behind me over there. The Zoom HD, still love that. Never officially available in the UK, I don't think it was. I imported mine in, but really an important piece of technology from Microsoft, because it actually, from Media Center to there, became Windows Phone, became Metro UI, which became Windows 8. So it's an important part of Microsoft's history.
Yeah, and Windows 11.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, have a look at that, and we'll talk about that more on a future show. But I'm going to be my digital coffee table book on my Surface. I'll go and have a coffee now and reminisce on the great Zoom.
Well, I guess this time next week we'll know what Microsoft has in store for the future of Surface, won't we?
Yeah, the event's next week. Is it the 22nd, 23rd, 22nd? So next Wednesday. So we won't know when we record next week's show. But by the time next week's show is broadcast, we will know. So next week we have got a chance to speculate before it goes out. But yeah, we're gonna. There's so
Satya's got 1 week left in which to cancel the Duo 2. I mean, he's got 4.
Yeah, definitely. Could be interesting to see what they announce there. I don't think we're going to see anything too exciting, as in like the Neo or anything like that. I think we're going to see improvements over existing devices, but we can definitely talk about that next week as well. I think while I was in Manchester meeting Garry, I did go to John Lewis and have a look, and it's the first time I've seen a Surface Go 2, I think, in person, because I don't think since they launched that I've not been to a retail store. And actually, I couldn't really tell any difference. So it looks very much like the one I've got in front of me here. So, but at least they had a good selection of Surface devices in John Lewis, which sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. It seems to vary. But yeah, they had a good selection in there. And the Surface Pro 7, first time I've actually seen that. Nice looking device, but again, with the Surfaces so far, you can't really tell a huge amount of difference between each since the Surface Pro 3, not since each version.
Yeah.
But anyway, we can definitely talk about that next week and what we're going to expect to see. So, are you going now pre-ordering your iPhone, Richard?
No.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll get him on a future show, and he's got an iPhone 13 Pro Max.
Definitely not going to do it. No, absolutely not. If I get any iPhone, it will be an SE. I've decided that the flagship phone is just no point anymore. But I'm also waiting to see what happens with the Duo 2. Yeah,
we'll see about that. Find out on that on next week's show. So, Garry, where can we find you?
You can find me at Garry with RYMA. I'll get my words right. Garry WMA on Twitter, and you can find me at fascinatingtech.com as well, which we've got the latest issue out. We've got some nice reviews in.
Excellent. And Richard, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed.
Excellent. Right, we'll be back same time next week. I Dixon on Twitter if I get my words out. We'll see you next week.
Cheerio.
Cheers.